Okay, guys, we're here today with John Danaher. Huge honor for me, Plácido. Guys, today John just shot the entire instructional for the third series of the New Wave Jiu-Jitsu, all about guard. And this guard series, you're gonna have two instructions, right, John? The first one and the second
guard
one.
is a huge topic. You can't really cover it in one element. So there'll be at least 2 guard videos covering our whole squad approach to guard position.
Yeah, and John, I was watching and I was very impressed with how many options there are to attack, to set up, to finish, and to connect. So
I would probably say if people out there watching this video associate one thing with my students, it's the ability to come out, sit in the center of the stage, and take an extremely aggressive, even intimidating guard position where opponents are very worried about engaging. They feel if they over-engage, they're going to get finished. There's a dual threat of leg locks and moves that feed off overreactions to the leg locks, where people come up, score reversals, get top position, pass, and work their way towards their opponent's back. But everything starts with that sense in which the person, unusually in Jiu-Jitsu, is even from bottom position leading the dance, as it were. They're the ones who, we typically don't associate bottom position with pressure. Normally you think the top guy is the one who creates pressure. But what's unusual about my students is they have a propensity to create a pressure through threat. There's a sense in which people are afraid to go in, and that threat either results in a submission by itself or creates reactions to the threat, overreactions, to be honest with you, that mean they can come up for positional moves and work your way towards your opponent's back. What I really wanted to do in the New Wave Jiu-Jitsu series is to look at guard position in a way which is very different from traditional methods. Now, Bernardo, when you and I learned guard, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we probably learned the same way.
close guard.
You got shown a guard. They chose a guard. It was usually closed guard. It was closed guard when I was young. I think it was closed guard for you too. You were shown a guard, and you were shown a collection of moves from guard. Scissor sweep, Kimura, you know the drill. And then as you got older, you learned a new guard, butterfly guard, X guard, or what have you, Danaher guard. And the way Jiu-Jitsu has always been traditionally taught from guard position is, okay, here's a guard, and here's a collection of moves from there. And the students go out, they learn the guard, and then they learn a collection of moves. Then they get thrown into a sparring situation and they try their best to apply the moves. And the results usually aren't particularly impressive. Most people struggle to transition from drilling, which seems to be quite easy for them, versus sparring, which is often very, very difficult. I would say, in my experience teaching, that most beginners in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu typically find bottom position more challenging than top position. The skills required are less familiar to most people. If you're an average 25-year-old guy coming in for his first days in Jiu-Jitsu, most of them have a good sense of roughhousing when they were young, to wrestling with their brothers, and they have a sense of, okay, if they're in top position, they can have a rough idea of what they're supposed to do. But guard position is like this whole new thing. It's like nothing in life prepares you for that. We don't grow up learning how to wrestle from our back and use all 4 of our limbs. So it's a real challenge. So what I wanted to do in this series was look at how I coach guard position to my students. How is it that they're able to go out and create pressure from bottom position through threat and intimidation of a certain kind of submissions program, which enables them to either get very quickly into submission holds or create reactions in fear of that, which leads to positional attacks. And that's really the main thing that we're looking at here. One of the big themes that I'm trying to push, Bernardo, is the idea that Jiu-Jitsu players must start going beyond the traditional approach of looking at high percentage technique from guard position and start adding to that the idea of high percentage strategies from guard position.
Makes sense.
I think once you understand that the strategies that govern your technique are every bit as important as the technique themselves, that's when your guard position starts really progressing rapidly. I've always been very proud of the fact that my students excel in the bottom position, and they're able to go out and get an unusually high submission rate out of bottom position jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
I've always associated guard position as the quintessential jiu-jitsu position. If you look at other grappling styles, they have many elements that are actually pretty similar to jiu-jitsu. But one thing which is really distinctive about jiu-jitsu is guard position. Like there's many grappling styles, judo, sambo, wrestling, they have many moves in common with us. But guard is
only jiu-jitsu.
It's pretty much jiu-jitsu. Judo has a guard, sambo has a guard, but it's not a big part of the sport. It's underdeveloped. Whereas jiu-jitsu, the quintessential jiu-jitsu position, the one I associate most with the sport, variations of guard position. So I always push my students to play the bottom game first, to learn that first, because it is, I believe, for most people a little more challenging, and then work from there. And it shows in my students. They're all very dangerous from bottom position. And I wanted to teach that, the methodology that I use to teach my students, and put it on this video series. The first thing might be a bit of a surprise. I'm going to ask you a question, Bernardo. I'm curious about your answer, actually, because I wonder how this squares with your experience. Tell me the first things you learned in guard position when you were a beginning student.
Was close guard.
Me too. I use close guard.
And
now,
then
be more precise. What did they teach you from close guard?
Scissor sweep.
Good.
I call it hand on the belt sweep.
Good.
Kimura.
Good.
Armbar.
Good.
Choke.
Excellent.
Strangle.
Good. Okay. Those are almost identical to what I learned.
And
now, there's something in common with all those moves. They're all offensive moves. Okay. What was the next thing you learned?
I think when my opponent stands up, grab the both shins and...
Good. I learned the same thing.
And then, now that you mentioned about the offensive, I really started thinking about the defense of it. And my instructor, which was very good with the fundamentals of... He used to do a lot of drills about how to recover the guard. Like the guy passed my guard here, hip escape, bring the knee in, and have him on guard again and go to the close. But those are the basic moves that I...
What I've always noticed in most coaching programs is that when people first go to learn guard, they're taught almost exclusively how to attack from guard position. And this is, that's a healthy thing. It's not wrong. It's how I learned it. My experience is similar to you. I was taught how to attack from close guard and then ultimately different forms of guard. But the overwhelming majority of guard training for most beginning jiu-jitsu students is offensive. It's how to attack from guard position.
That's true.
I take a very different approach. My whole thing when I first start teaching guard to people is retention.
That's amazing, John.
I start with retention. Okay, I start with retention for the same reason, plus you'll see this whenever you come to train with us. I always start jiu-jitsu training in general with defense. Okay, all of my students have to start with defense. That's odd, right? Because my students are mostly associated with a strong submission offense. But all of their early training is all defensive training. And the logic is very simple, that if they don't believe in their ability to get out of bad position, they'll never take a risk
to attack
for offense. So they won't pull the trigger when the ability to do so is there. Exactly the same thing is true of guard position. Let's say you've got a really great armbar from guard. You've been training it, you've drilled it so many times you can do it in your sleep, and it feels great. But you're going against someone you believe is a very strong guard passer. And in the hurly-burly of it, you're fighting from bottom, he's fighting from top, he's scrambling to pass your guard. You see the opportunity, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. If it doesn't work, I'm going to compromise my position, he's going to pass. What are you going to do? You're going to hesitate. You're going to second guess, and then the situation's gone. I see this all the time. If you don't believe in your ability to recover from a failed attack from guard position, you won't attack. You'll find an excuse to hang back. My students attack without fear in guard position because they believe it's highly unlikely someone is going to pass as they're attacking because they've got good retention skills. Just as I always start them with pin escapes so that they never fear going for submissions. If someone passes and gets across their side, they know they can get out. So too with retention, because they know every time they attempt an attack, there's a very good likelihood they'll be able to retain guard and stay in guard. They're not afraid to attack from guard. Now, for you guys out there that have maybe just been doing jiu-jitsu not such a long time, this isn't such an issue for you. That tends to occur more at the advanced levels. But even for someone who's just starting out in jiu-jitsu, I have some little words for you. I could sit here all day and show you some amazing attacking moves from guard that you'd be like, wow, that's so cool, I never thought of that. I could show you all of this, and it won't help you. Why? Because when you go back into the beginner's class that you're working in, and you try to employ them, your opponent passes you guard, and you just don't have enough time to employ the moves. Every move from guard position requires time. If you can't hold your guard long enough, none of them are going to help you. The first requirement of excellence in guard position is the ability to retain guard long enough that you can get the moves to work. If Placido just blows through my guard before I get anything going, my armbar is not going to help me, my triangle is not going to help me. So the first prerequisite of successful guard play is time. You have to be able to hold and retain the guard long enough to get the damn move to work. And then secondarily, as you get more advanced in the sport, that's when the psychological element starts coming in. That's when you've got to be able to have confidence that even at the highest levels, you can retain guard so that you can take risks from guard position without fear. If you don't believe you can take a risk, you won't fire, you won't pull the trigger when the opportunity is right there in front of you. So that's why, Bernardo, almost all of my guard play training begins with retention.
No, that makes a lot of sense, John.
Now, the model of retention that I'm going to teach in this video is one which I push upon all my students. This is the knowledge denial model. Plus, the knowledge denial model, I'll bring the camera in front, is the idea that there are certain things that my opponent has to do in order to pass my guard, okay? If my opponent is at distance, he can never pass my guard from here. So the first and most obvious thing is he has to close distance. If he can't close distance, he'll never pass my guard. Now, if he goes to close distance on me and I'm constantly moving back, well, I've beaten him on distance, but I'm playing kind of a negative game at this point. I'm kind of stalling. You don't really want to do that too much. So we try to limit how much we play the distance game with him. The next thing he has to do is get angle on me. Okay, as long as he's lined up with my center line, he'll never pass my guard. Even if he just continues to close distance, all he does is come onto my attacks. He's not going to pass my guard that way. So he needs to close distance and form an angle. Another critical element is he must form grips upon me. If he has no grip upon me, there's no reason why I can't just follow his movements. So he's got, as he comes in close, to establish grips, distance, and angle. Then from here, he has to be able to level change down. If he stays up, there's no guard pass. And from here, I can always recover my legs and put him back in guard. So you'll see that in order to pass my guard, he's got to close distance, establish grips, form an angle, and begin the action of level changing. As he level changes, he has to be able to expose my chest and torso. If he cannot expose my chest and torso, he simply runs onto my various frames. And off those frames, we can always recover guard on our training pattern. So you see, the first one is the closing of distance. Then grip, angle. He's got to generate, after that level change, some kind of exposure. Then from here, he has to be able to pin my head and shoulders to the mat. Jiu-Jitsu is very clear. If I can keep my shoulder, at least both of my shoulders off the mat for 3 seconds, there's no pin here. He needs to pin one of my shoulders to the mat for 3 seconds. That's what constitutes a successful guard pass. So from here, as he comes forward, if I can just get a last ditch attempt to get my shoulders off the mat, there's no pin from this position. Okay, now there is some back exposure, so that's when we have to go back into the distance game, and now we've escaped. So you see, there are 6 elements that he must satisfy. He's got to be able to close distance. He's got to be able to establish grips. He's got to be able to get angle. He's got to be able to level change. He's got to be able to expose my torso, and he has to be able to pin my head and shoulders to the mat for 3 seconds. If I can stop him from doing even one of those six things, he'll never pass my guard. Okay, so that's the knowledge that you have to have. You have to know what those 6 elements are, and I have to be able to deny them to him. So you have to know the 6 elements. We talk about them a lot in the video, and we have to show how to deny them. So if, say, for example, someone comes in and from here, he goes in, gets his grips on me, and goes out to the side. When he goes to level change, I can use frames to make it difficult for him. Okay? Once we get a frame in place, as he comes down, my elbow and knee are in close together. It's going to be relatively simple for us now to establish a guard. Okay? So we're learning to deny all of those 6 elements as they occur. Now, the knowledge denial model is a really good way for students to understand guard retention. But a big part of this video is going beyond the knowledge
not only to retain, but also to
attack. Okay, and what I'm trying to impress upon people is every time people come around the corner, every active retention has to end with offense. In particular, leg offense, because the legs are available to a greater degree than the rest of the body. We talk about this a lot in the video. We call this the maximizing theory of guard retention, that students have to learn a more offensive element to guard play. You can't just retain and retain and retain against a strong dominating passer. You have to be able to go beyond that and work counter offense. And so we'll often work the idea that as Placido goes into his various parts, he goes through all the various 6 elements. As we find ourselves defending and working from positions like this, as I block off my training partner, rather than being happy with just putting him back in guard, there's many situations from here. We can go around the corner and start locking up on our training partner's legs, and from here, go right into counter offense. It doesn't have to be lower body. As Placido, say for example, puts in an X pass, puts a hand on the hip, and comes around the corner, there's going to be many opportunities for us to go into upper body attacks. Okay. If he comes around the corner, start passing at the shoulder line, there's going to be many opportunities for us under these circumstances to spin around and find ourselves in all kinds of upper body attacks. As we lose an upper body attack and he goes to posture up and away, you can go back downstairs into lower body attacks. Okay, so we constantly work this idea of taking an offensive or counter-offensive approach to guard retention. Rather than seeing it as a completely defensive way of operating, we see it as a counter-offensive way.
No, and John, I think that makes it very clear to understand like how you're constantly putting pressure even though you're on board, right? Because when you go from one triangle to one leg attack to another leg attack, even though you're on board,
and it's intimidating for the other guy. If the other guy thinks that even when I'm passing his guard, he's attacking me, I mean, how enthusiastic is he going to be about passing your guard? If he went for his best guard pass and he almost got it, and the result was he had to scramble for his life out of a leg lock, how hard do you think he's going to come back for his next guard pass? He's going to be hanging back. So, oh man.
John, it was fun to watch you doing it, because this exercise that you were doing from here, like over here, this was one of the drills that I used to do the most when I started Jiu-Jitsu. They would come to this side, and I would try and escape. But I love it, like how fancy it gets when you do it, like going to the legs, and so it's like
what you find is anytime you get angled like that with your head close to the mat, you can almost always invert into your opponent's legs. It's almost always the case. Now, Bernardo, we started with the idea of guard retention. Okay, my students get sick of hearing me say this, that everything begins with retention.
No, I can see that. I can literally see like from that drill, for example, it's a drill that I did in 2001 when I started Jiu-Jitsu, and you made it just like
tweak it and bring it into counter offense. Now we want to go beyond that. We start going into the offensive elements of guard. That's where the video really picks up pace. And the first theme that I wanted to push upon all of you in this video is the idea of a very strong initial attack. As I said earlier in this YouTube clip, my students are known for their ability to come out, sit in what most people see as bottom position is the more passive position in Jiu-Jitsu, and yet they can exert incredible threat and pressure from bottom and attack people. I preach to my students the idea of continuous engagement. Now, that's a phrase that doesn't have any meaning for you. Let's give it some meaning. Most of the attacks that I can put upon an opponent from guard position can be defeated by simple changes in posture on the part of my opponent. Let's give some examples. If Placido is standing on your knees, Placido is kneeling in front of me. Let's say, Bernardo, that I'm known as someone who's got a really strong triangle. Okay? Yep. Placido knows my game is triangle, and as long as he stays on the knees, it's going to be really easy for me to start disrupting new ways which set up triangles. Okay? But Placido's smart. He's done his research, and so moving away. When he comes to engage, he stands up, and he plays the game standing. Now, if we were working with a gi on, triangles would still be very effective from here. I could latch onto my training partner's cuff, I could get to my training partner's cross lapel, and I could use the cross lapel to keep the head down. Okay, so triangles with the gi would still be absolutely workable here. But no gi, man, it's hard for me to control the head, no gi. Even if I get control of the arm, the head is not controlled. When I try to throw up into triangles from this position, man, it's tough. Yeah, because the posture's making it difficult. Okay. Similarly, with arm bars, he's down on two knees. From situations like so, as we play, this is not a difficult thing for me to go up into arm bars. Placido knows that. So from the situation where he goes to stand, now working into arm bars, it's unless he's holding my head, man, it's going to be tough. He's as it were, tripled his height relative to me, and the upper body is now so far away from me, I'm going to have to do some pretty serious work to bring him back down to an armbar game. Similarly with sumigeshi, he's down, two knees. If I've got a strong sumigeshi from a situation like so, this is a great time to start sweeping people with sumigeshi. Placido knows that, so he stands up. That kills my sumigeshi game. Let's say I'm known for, say, X-guard, if that's my thing. If Placido knows X-guard is my strong point, the smart thing for him to do is just drop down to two knees. Now I can get to X-guard, but it's going to take me some extra work, and he can make that difficult through me through grip fighting. Can you see how once someone knows what your strong points are, they can change their posture and demeanor to shut it down? Yep. My point to you is this, Bernardo. There is one part of the body and one tactic your opponent can never shut down, and that's leg locks. I don't care where you are, and I don't care where he is. The one part of the body which is always exposed is legs. He can be on two knees. That means nothing. You can punch right into legs. He's on one knee, and it's just as easy. He's standing, and from here, again, it's just as easy for us to punch around the corner and find ourselves in all manner of leg locks. Okay? I don't care what his demeanor is on the mat. I don't care what his posture is. The legs are always available. Here's something a lot of people misunderstand about my coaching philosophy. Many people think that the reason I put such a heavy emphasis on leg work is because opponents don't know how to defend legs. The idea is, well, they were smart to choose leg locks because other people didn't understand them, so that's why they have a high submission rate. That's actually not the case at all. It's true that when the squad first broke out, leg lock defense technology was pretty undeveloped. And as a result, some of the wins were easier than they would be today, for sure. There's no denying this. But that wasn't the motivation for attacking legs and making that the core of our guard program. The real reason is because the legs can never be hidden by posture. The one part of the body that my opponent can never fully hide from me is the legs. And as a result, I don't care what he does in terms of tactics, you can always find a way to the legs. It creates a threat that your opponent simply can't hide from. They have to address it. As opposed to upper body submissions, which can be largely shut down just by the simple act of standing up and moving away from your opponent in a no-gi context. Most forms of sweep only work against or can be applicable against a certain posture, but leg locks will work on any posture at any time in the match. They create a continuous threat that is so hard to hide from that even when the squad is matched against each other in the gym, where we all have good leg lock defense, it's still the primary attack. It has nothing to do with how good or how bad our opponents are at leg lock defense. It just has to do with the simple facts of the human body. The legs can't be hidden by posture. The more my opponent postures up his upper body, the easier it is to get to his legs. He can't hide his legs by putting his knees on the floor. Simple acts of elevation or going through into half guard will immediately make his legs vulnerable to attack. Once you understand this, you will see that the legs represent the single best way to keep a continuous attack on your opponent throughout the time in which you're employing guard position. Even in cases where you know your opponent has strong leg lock defense, I still advocate the use of legs just to create a constant threat that your opponent has to address. Even if he is addressing it and he's got good leg lock defense, he's still distracted by it. And you are in control of the dance. You're the one who's pushing the action. He's reacting to you. And as a result, all the other moves will become easier. Then suddenly your upper body submissions become easier. Your reversals become easier because he's so damn distracted by the constant threat on the legs.
No, and I love like how lately your students are using leg attacks, not only for submission, even they're coming out of sweeps from the leg attacks, like as Gordon just did against Roberto, for example.
Yeah.
So that's amazing too, because many times you see like leg lockers that all they try is leg locks, and then the other guy for some reason doesn't tap and they lose the match. And but now I see like this another evolution where they go for the leg attacks, but they have an arsenal of sweeps as well from there.
Once you learn that you can create a constant, unending pressure on the legs, that's when you start to understand there is a direct relationship between the leg lock game and the positional game. A tragedy in Jiu-Jitsu over the last decade when the squad became well known is that people saw you were either a leg lock guy or you were a positional guy. That's a completely artificial and even foolish distinction. Leg locks and position are just as strongly linked as any other submission hold. You see this with my students. At least half the time we use the threat of leg locks to get positional attacks, to get top position or get the back. And the two are strongly linked. If you put an artificial divide between leg locks and position, you're killing yourself. Now, at that point, you're making the same mistake that Jiu-Jitsu made 20 years ago when they said you should only attack the upper body. It's just the same mistake in reverse. Now you're just saying just attack the lower body. You're just making the same dumb mistake. The idea isn't to attack the upper body or the lower body. It's to attack 100% of the human body. That's the idea. And only when you link legs and position does this get done. So a big theme of the new wave Jiu-Jitsu is exactly what you just alluded to. How do we use the constant threat of leg attacks profitably? It's not just about getting the leg submissions. Sure, if you get it, awesome, well done, the match is over, you won. But if you don't, it leads right into the positional game. But the first skills that I get my students to learn, and this is the subject of this first guard video, the two things that you have to learn before anything else in my guard program, you got to learn retention. Because if you can't retain guard, you won't be able to hold it long enough to get the attacks to work. And no amount of offense is going to be any good if the guy just blows through your guard. So you got to have retention. Secondly, you got to have retention for a psychological reason. That if you're afraid to press your attacks because you're going to get positionally beat, you're not going to pull the trigger when the time is right. So you have to have retention. That's the first part of my program. We have to go beyond just the standard knowledge denial model. You have to have a counter-offensive model, a maximizing model, where every time you retain guard, boom, you go into counter-offense. Most of it is done on the legs. And then the second great theme of the video is start with strong leg attacks. That's the one part of your opponent's body they can never deny you. They can deny you many things. They can deny you many forms of sweep. They can deny you many forms of upper body submission. They can never deny your legs. So when you've got strong leg locks, you can always form a situation where you are the one pressing the action and the other guy is reacting to you.
even if the leg locks aren't working, he's still reacting to them.
Yeah.
If he doesn't address them, he's going to get finished.
Yeah.
If you can, as it were, take the driver's seat through leg locks, that's when the stuff we look at further in the series, when we look at the second guard videos start coming to play, we get a link between leg locking and positional play. And that's when you just get these fascinating elements of the game that you often see exhibited by my students at the highest levels.
No, that's amazing, John. Yeah, that's amazing. Now, we can't wait to launch this one. And I think it differentiates a lot from the leg attacks enter the system.
Yeah.
Because now we are talking about how to get there, how to play guard, how to get a sweep, how to get a retention.
The basic idea is that enter the system was essentially very specific submission systems. Okay, you get the position, here's how you cover all the ground needed to make someone tap. So it was a submission system only in the context of making someone tap from a very set specific situation. Now we're looking at the whole interface between position and submission, which is what we typically use in ADCC training. Okay, so enter the system was more relevant in, say, for example, early EBI competition, where there was no penalty for positional loss. And so everything came down to specific positions and overtimes and regulation, where we would get to very strong finishing position, control all the options and finish people. In ADCC, you've got to take position seriously. And so New Wave Jiu-Jitsu is designed to show the coaching methodologies we employ and at World Championship level for ADCC.
No, that's amazing, John. Yeah, we can't wait. Yeah, so guys, John just finished filming the entire structure for the first part of the guard, New Wave Jiu-Jitsu. And it came out amazing, and it's going to be at IBJJFanatics.com soon. So maybe by the time you're watching, it's already there. And thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Plácido.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please help me out to grow my YouTube channel. Just click subscribe. And to watch more videos, just click under see more videos. I hope you enjoyed.
BJJFanatics.com. Use the promo code YouTubeFaria to get 10% off any instructional video. Improve your jiu-jitsu faster.